Well, today on the Delighted Customers podcast, I am so excited. We are going almost halfway around the globe to Germany, where I am so excited to welcome my guest, Dr. Graham Hill, to the show. Dr. Hill, welcome to the show.
Good day, many thanks.
I want to tell you a little bit of background as to why I invited Dr. G on the show. He and I started connecting. I don't know how we first started, but on through LinkedIn and commentaries on things related to customer experience, related to customer loyalty. Started to find him more and more interesting as no matter what we wrote about, he would quickly come up with 3 or 4 citations from papers and documents and books from graphs, charts. And I knew this guy was super smart, wicked smart, as they say in Boston. And then we got into this conversation about internally, how do we create change within the organization to ultimately end up with more loyal customers. So we talk about developing relationships with stakeholders and how important it was to build those that network inside the organization and work with people. And he mentioned this concept of Nemawashi. And so I'm going to introduce him by telling you that he has true global background where he worked with PricewaterhouseCoopers and then Pricewaterhouse, KPMG Consulting, and worked with some of the best and most recognized brands across the globe. We were just talking about British Airways, but also Toyota. And he spent quite a bit of time doing work with Toyota and was trained. And, we have a tremendous amount of respect for Toyota and their ability to build unbelievable automobiles and electronics and so forth. But Nemawashi was critical to that. So I'd love for you to, if you could, we're going to talk a little bit about how the Japanese approached how to build organizations that ultimately do right by the customer, delight customers, but do through Nemawashi and A3 model that maybe we can gain some insights from. So if you don't mind, share with us a little bit about this concept and level set for the audience who may not be familiar with it.
Okay, you talked about a couple of things. Nemawashi, one of those things, which is, if you like, the art of gaining consensus. And that's quite important in Japanese companies, as obviously as well as it is for Western companies as well, but particularly Japanese companies because they obviously have a different culture than we have in the West. You also mentioned A3. So an A3 is literally, as the name suggests, an A3 sheet of paper. So in the West, we're used to 50-page presentations that, of course, nobody actually reads or looks at because it's too many pages and takes an absolute fortune and ages to write. In Toyota, where I learned all of these tools and use them every day in my work, you have one A3 sheet of paper, which is it's not something you fill in per se, although you do fill it in. It's a way of keeping a record of how you go about gaining consensus, back to Nemawashi again. And there are a variety of other things we'll talk about, including this concept of Gemba, where things are taking place, and so forth. So if I have a problem to solve, I spot something's going wrong with at Toyota, I was head of CRM for Toyota Financial Services. So I ran campaigns, and my main concern was repurchase management. So getting people who bought a Toyota in the past to buy another new Toyota, to insure it with Toyota Financial Services and to finance it with Toyota Financial Services. That's worth big money in automotive. So that was I'd be running a campaign. If I spotted an opportunity to improve it, or I wanted to run an A/B test, I would set up an A3 to capture all of the things I needed to go through in a step-by-step process to be able to understand the problem and identify my targets and what have you. But I need to gain consensus throughout that process, not at the end, like when we have in the West, I've got a great idea, do you like it? But actually all the way through in terms of the steps in the A3 process. So I would use the A3 to set out how I'd solve problems or identify opportunities, of course. And I'd use Nemawashi as a process to gain consensus with all the people who need to be involved. And that would often involve what people talk about in lean circles of going to the Gemba, so going to where things are actually carried out. Which in my case means I spent a lot of time talking to printers, a lot of time talking to dealers at dealerships, a lot of time talking to customers, a lot of time talking to the field force, because they're all the people who have a role to play in making sure an improvement is successful, and need to be involved in the process throughout, not just at the end or at the beginning where you're suggesting something new. So it's a way of, if you like, the Japanese art of getting consensus and getting things done without writing 50-page presentations that nobody reads.
And this is a really important thing to them, right? This idea of getting consensus, it goes even beyond just a sort of a logistical business process, right? It speaks to who they are as a people.
Yes, we are different in many ways culturally. If you look at people like Gert Hofstadter's book, Culture's Consequences, you can see different characteristics that different nationalities have, broadly speaking. But in the companies I work with in the West, big banks and telcos and airlines and other car companies and what have you, people like to be involved in things. People need to gain consensus if we want to get anything done. It's not fundamentally different. It's just different in perspective, and different from a cultural perspective as well. And whereas in Japan it's expected. I'm not an expert in Japanese companies, by the way. I spent 5 or 6 years working with Toyota in Germany. I learned a huge amount, but I'm not an expert in Japanese culture. But I do see things that they do differently that are, in my view, superior to the ways we do things in the West. And I always say, I learnt more from 5 years at Toyota than I did from 35 years working with some of the biggest brand names in the West, all put together. From American Airlines through Ford Motor Company to Royal Bank of Scotland. All of these put together, I learnt more from Toyota than all these other organizations put together in terms of how you run companies and how you make change successful.
And before we dig into what are some of the steps in Nemawashi, I want to echo or affirm what you said about, I think it's superior too. And I think so. I think it is because, gosh, basic human nature is we want to be understood, we want to be seen, we want to be heard, we want to be respected. And if you try to, I think you're the smartest person in the room and you come across that way, you're going to get some natural resistance. But if you take the time to learn and include and collaborate with other people and you're trying to make change, people underestimate how hard change is in organizations, then I think doing the things that the Japanese have done, which is Nemawashi, which is getting consensus as you describe, it may take a little more time, maybe on the front end, but in the long run, you're going to end up with a lot less headwinds. Would you agree?
I think that's true. And the science and the art of Nemawashi as part of the A3 process, let's call it that, means that by the time you get to the end of the process, you've already got commitment. So I don't want buy-in because people can be bought out by other things that come along. I want people to be committed. I want people to understand what my expectations of them are. If I'm creating a new marketing campaign to drive customers to repurchase Toyotas, I want the financial services group to be committed so that the call center, so that when the dealership calls in and say, I've got a potential customer, can you do a credibility check or a Schufa in German, what's it in English, a credit worthiness check and what have you, that they're all waiting and prepared and ready. I need to make sure that the dealers themselves are ready when I provide them with a really good lead. In terms of somebody who's likely to come in this weekend and have a look at a vehicle, I need to make sure that the field forces are ready to support the dealers. I can't leave those things to chance. Well, actually I can, but then as luck will have it, things won't work out, and I won't improve over time. And the other thing people talk about Kaizen, continuous improvement. The campaigns that I ran at Toyota would start out with a reasonably good response rate. Then I'd work at them every week and every month to improve them through countless experiments. And the end of a year, they'd go from a 5 to 10% response rate. So bought a new vehicle, got insured, got financed by Toyota, to a 35% response rate. Everybody I contacted bought a car, financed it through Toyota, insured it through Toyota, worked in marketing for many, many decades now, and I don't see many campaigns with a 35% response rate.
Yeah, definitely a reflection of a higher level of commitment. I just want to double click on what you said because sometimes guests like you share these gems and they come out so fast that people can miss them. So I don't want people to miss that one, which is subtle, but it's really important. I think could write a book on this topic alone, is executive buy-in versus commitment.
Yes.
And how important it is for one. Share more with us. Like, can you think of maybe not a specific example, but an example of how that could play out in a project where you're looking to make a change?
Yes, I'm trying to put it in the context of the work that it actually did, where commitment was really important. So we talked about the dealerships in the past. So in automotive, when marketing or sales identifies a lead, so you go to the website and you go to the car configurator, you configure your ideal car, and that gets captured as a lead by the manufacturer because they run the website. It gets passed on to the dealership as a hot lead. in reality, the dealership who lives in the real world rather than the world of marketing theory knows it's anything but a hot lead. So a hot lead for them is somebody's going to come in this week, next week at the latest. I already know what they're driving. I already know what they're like to be wanting to buy, and I don't know what sort of engine they're going to want, and all that sort of detail. And I also know that they can actually afford it. A hot lead from a dealer is different from a hot leader from a manufacturer. So that's how we can use it to get commitment from people. These are people with people at the front end.
Yeah. So what a great example of going from just the concept of buy-in to commitment. Commitment is a whole nother level, and Nemawashi can help us get there. What would you say is the reason that the C-suite should care or pay attention to this?
I think there's a very simple reason, and that is that particularly in Japan, but also in the West, the C-suite needs to know what's going on before they go to a meeting. So in Japan, if I go to a meeting and introduce a new concept to the senior people in the meeting, I'm in deep trouble because they expect me to talk to them individually beforehand to gauge their perceptions and their interest and look for objections that I might need to overcome. Fundamentally, it's no different in the West. So if I'm going to present something quite important that I want them to fund eventually, and I want them to give up their time in the interim while I'm working out how best to do it and how best to marshal all the resources I'm going to need them in advance. I can't just leave it to the end and say, here's a great idea. I need to talk about when thinking about, let's think about the problem and where we're going to get facts and figures about the real problem that we have in hand and how we're going to set targets. All that requires you to talk to the Swiss beforehand if you want them to know what's going on, to be engaged in it initially, then to be committed to seeing it through. Because all the things, no matter how clever we think we are, all the things we invent or decide upon may have challenges, things we haven't foreseen or couldn't possibly foresee, things from left field that get in the way or support you sometimes. We had a big supporting thing in Germany where the German government decided halfway through the campaign that they wanted to support people to buy new cars to get old second-hand dirty cars off the road. So we had this great situation where we were saying, buy a new car, and we think you're in the market, and we've got this great thing from the government who's going to give you money to swap your old car for your old banger for a brand new car. So that that helped us in many ways. But to be involved and to support you and to be committed, not bought in again, then they need to be informed, they need to be engaged, and they need to be involved in the whole process. And that's why Nemawashi, which is relatively light touch most of the time, is a really powerful tool. But it's a nice name. We should be doing this in the West anyway, shouldn't we? This is just common sense, surely.
I just also want to double tap on what you said about not surprising the C-suite or not trying to drop in like Superman into save the day with some great theory or idea, but giving them some advance notice, keeping them informed. May seem counterintuitive. It may seem like extra work. I don't know if this goes into some of the myths around Nemawashi or the collaborative process, but would you agree with that? And what other myths might there be around this?
So unless you've been working with Japanese companies, Nemawashi is relatively unheard of. Everybody's heard of Kaizen or Lean and what have you because they've been in the public domain and been discussed and used quite widely. But Nemawashi is something you only really practice if you work with Japanese companies. So if you'll permission, I'm going to broaden this out a little bit to the myths around change and how we facilitate change. The first myth that I recognize is that, hence my use of the word facilitate, change is not something you can manage. Change is an emergent phenomenon. So, in other words, change occurs through the interactions of lots of other people in your organization or other organizations as well, talking to each other, that decide something's going to be different. We talk about people resisting change, but people change all the time. What I find in my work over many years running large programs of work, because the people don't resist change, they resist being changed by others. You do something different rather than get engaged in deciding how you're going to do things yourself. But also, we have this Western thing where we set North Stars. We want to get to this nirvana that we're never going to reach, of course, but that's the nirvana we're going to aim for. We have really complicated plans about how we're going to get there. But if anything changes, then the plan starts to fall apart. And as I think it was von Clausewitz said a long time ago, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. And I think Eisenhower said during the Second World War that plans are nothing. Planning is everything.
So lots of great gems here. Folks, if you're listening, we'll have links to these in the show notes.
Yep.
But I want to dig into Nemawashi, if you would share a bit about the steps, maybe walk us through an illustration in the real world of what it might look like.
So in order, Nemawashi applies in the context of how you build consensus around an A3. So we talked about an A3 sheet. An A3 has a series of steps, and the steps are: you define the problem. You'd be amazed how many times I go and talk to people in the organizations, they're not actually clear what the problem is. You go talk to marketing, sales, and service, and you think it's all radically different. So the first step is actually agreeing what the problem is before we can really get going. Then the next step is then you identify what you know about the problem. So you have to go to the Gemba, go to see where things are really going. That means getting out of your office. There's a entrepreneur professor called Steve Blank and works at Berkeley, I think, in the USA, in the Bay Area. He's been a serial entrepreneur, and he says there are no facts inside the building. So get outside the building and go to the Gemba, go see where things are happening and learn by observing what's going on. What a process called Toyota calls Genchi Genbutsu, go see for yourself, rather than relying on reports. So you go and see what's going on, you gather facts and figures, then you set your stretch targets or targets you want to achieve. Basically, now you have an understanding. Then you go and do root cause analysis after that, trying to work out what the problems are. Then you'll define your interventions. Then you'll plan those interventions, and then you'll plan follow-up, because obviously we need to be able to monitor, monitor, manage this work in progress. It probably won't all be done at the same time. So let's take, if you think about this step by step, the problem. I have a problem with a marketing campaign. I want to increase my repurchase rate for new vehicle sales with existing customers. So I need to go and talk to the dealerships, because they're the ones who actually sell cars. I need to go and talk to marketing inside inside Toyota. I need to go and talk to financial services, because they're the one who are going to be saying, yes, you can buy a car, or no, you can't buy a car for whatever reason. I need to go talk to the field force. I might need to go and talk to the printer about some things I might be wanting to do, some vouchers I want to offer as part of the deal. So I go and talk to different people about the problem, and I capture that detail, the consensus, as part of the A3 sheet, a little section at the top. There's a great article, by the way, by John Schuck called Toyota's Secret Weapon, or Toyota's Secret, the A3 Report, an MIT Sloan Management Review article from 1987. It's got a good framework to use, it's one that I tend to use. So we've now agreed by doing some Nemawashi what the problem is. Then I need to go and find out some facts and figures about the problem. So how many people are buying cars that bought one previously? What are they buying? What did they buy previously? How much are they paying? And which dealership did they buy from? Where they cluster? All those sorts of things. What stops them buying? So I need to go and talk to the people who know what's going on again. So I'll go to the dealership again, to the field force, and go to financial services. Probably won't go to marketing quite so easily, because they're not so relevant. But I'll go and then I'll define the next stage, which is what I know about the problem. So more Nemawashi, more talking to people, more showing and comparing things. It's a one-on-one thing rather than a meeting. We're not going to have a meeting. I'm going to go and talk to them. I'm going to get out of my office and go to the dealerships and talk to dealer principals and sales managers in the dealers to find out what's really going on. So now we know what the problem is. We've agreed that. We know we gathered a load of facts and figures describing the problem. Now I can set my targets that we want to achieve based on my understanding of the problem. And again, more Nemawashi with different people. So I'm going to talk to finance, I'm going to talk to sales, I'm going to talk to the call center, I'm going to talk to dealers, because obviously they want to sell vehicles as well. I'm going to talk to other people that have anything to do with this. And I'm going to set my targets. If my targets are low, 1% improvement, 5% improvement, I can probably achieve this without doing a great deal different. If they're 10% or 20% or 30% different, then doing more of the same won't work. So I need to be more creative about what I do in a minute. I made a mistake early on in my time as head of CRM at Toyota, and I appeared in the meeting and I did some calculations, and I said to my Japanese colleagues, I think we could probably achieve 30% if I worked really, really hard. And like a fool, next time the minutes came around, my target had been set to 30%. You don't disappoint your Japanese colleagues. So now I had a target I had to achieve. There's no maybe. No, I had to achieve it. So I had to put it to all the stops. And then it became even more important. So we set our targets we want to achieve. Then the next step is we're going to do some root cause analysis to understand. I understand the facts and figures, but I need to understand why things are occurring. What people buy and why do they buy? Why do people not buy? What do they buy? Why do they not buy? Etc. So I can go and figure out how do I calculate the right offer to make for them. It's an individual finance offer. Who can't have one because the maths don't work out at the end of the day? So, and again, I'm talking to finance again. I'm talking to some of the people in sales again and other parts of the organization around the next challenge I have, which is, how do we understand the root cause of the problem that I'm occurring, the opportunity I want to achieve? Now I've got the 30% target, staring over me too. Having done that, then we go around the same process again, looking at interventions. What am I going to do? What am I going to provide to hit my 30%? So I know what the problem is. I know I've got loads of facts and figures. I know the root cause of the problem, why they do and don't buy. I know my target, and I also know now I can use that to identify what I'm going to do. And I described it earlier on. We used a well-proven campaign borrowed from a dealer in Bolton and Lancashire in North England, and adapted that as our test bed, as our starting point. Then we go around the process of, we're now agreed what we're going to do. I've gone to talk to the printer. Can they print the vouchers they need to do? We've ran a competition. Can we do is legal happy with the competition we want to run, etc. Can I get my print campaign, my print schedule all organised? Are the dealers expecting? Are the field force engaged and informed? Are they able to force? You get the point. Then I go through the planning process. And again, more input from other people to Nemawashi. And then I identify the follow-up that we're going to be doing, because we're Toyota, we do Kaizen. So having launched the campaign, having been to that first round in Nemawashi, then I go create an improvement A3 where I'm trying new things out afterwards. So we've run the campaign, we've got a 5 to 10% response rate, which is already pretty good, but not good enough, because my target is now 30%, because I was an idiot in a meeting and I set myself a target I had to achieve. So every time we ran the campaign, we changed some things. We talked to the same person in Nemawashi, talking to the dealer principals about some dealers were very successful at selling cars that they individualised offers to customers, and were not. So we went to talk to the ones that were successful and said, what did you do? And also the ones that weren't successful and said, what did you do or what didn't you do? We thought we'd change the spreadsheets we produce on a weekly basis to the dealers to say, okay, here are your target customers. And we added more information that we could do to help them say, okay, so they know what you're driving, what your monthly rate is, what your balloon is, what your down payment was, what we're going to be offering you, all sorts of information, so they're ready to go and talk to them and proactively, rather than hope that they're going to come at the weekend. Because we've got a great offer for you, key for key. It's a wonderful offer. And if you take part, there's a competition to win free financing. In terms of other than the cost, no additional financing fees, by taking part in a prize draw. So there's all those things going on at the same time, week by week, month by month. At the end of a year, we've gone from a 5 to 10% response rate, so bought a new vehicle, financed it, insured it, to a 35% response rate. By ruthlessly applying Kaizen, having an A3 improvement, A3, and using more Nemawashi, because now I want to get people to change their behaviour. As I said at the start, the dealers, when they would get a lead from a manufacturer, would say, this is going to be rubbish, I'm not going to bother. We had great hot leads for individuals who would highly like to buy a car with a great offer, an individualised finance offer for them. So, we had a great story to tell. But we needed to persuade the dealers to do something different rather than just ignoring it. So we had to engage the field sales forces for financial services and for sales, new vehicle sales. They go and support the dealer and say, you've got your sheet. They got the same sheets as well. You've got your sheet. Let's talk about these individual customers and let's start do a few calls together. And we also talked to customers about what attracted them and made them buy, and which all that fed into continuous improvement, Kaizen, to achieve those targets that, if I'd worked for another car company, wouldn't have been possible.
Really fascinating walk through it. One of the things I like is sort of built into the process is you're taking a guide versus a hero approach by insisting on collaboration and insisting on ensuring that number one, you're asking the right questions, but your people don't feel like you're coming in with the solution.
Although we did provide solutions at the end, but the solutions weren't invented by me. The original idea came from another dealer who was very successful with this campaign. If you work for a manufacturer, an auto manufacturer, they think the idea of a great campaign is a glossy brochure in an A4 format, full of very expensive photographs of always young people, because people buy cars. Not. If you go talk to a dealer, a dealer's idea of a perfect campaign is one sheet of A3 paper saying, "Dear Mr. Smith, please come in on a Saturday. Here's what you're buying, here's what you're driving, here's what you're paying. Come in on Saturday, you can have a new car, same vehicle again, same monthly payment. We'll see you on Saturday." That's the dealer's idea of a great campaign, not a glossy brochure. So my job was to be a bridge between the manufacturer, Toyota, and their dealerships. And I engaged also other people to support me in the process. But I was just merely a facilitator using the framework that Toyota provided to me on a plate.
Yeah. I love both the collaborative aspect of it, but also the fact that it gets on an A3, it can fit on an A3, a single sheet of paper, makes it simple.
So I did have other spreadsheets with calculations of pricing and what have you. And I had a process map that I drew up separately as well to show how the process of creating a campaign, so I could teach others how to do it after I left. I was only interim head of CRM. and I found my replacement and left. They needed to know what was going on, so we had a process model for them to work through as well. More Toyota thinking. The other thing is that there's this idea of continuous improvement. So I've worked for many, quite some decades now in marketing. And what I typically see is marketers will run a campaign, then they'll move on to the next campaign. There won't be this process of pulling it apart and looking to ways to improve it. I mean, mine was driven by working for Toyota. I had a 30% target, so I have to keep improving it literally every week or every month. Otherwise, I'm toast. But that Kaizen process, when you win it with Toyota, that's part of everybody's day job. I mean, I showed this book. I hope you can see this. It's got an old book.
40 years, 30 million, 20 million ideas.
40 years, 20 million ideas. And these are often small ideas identified by people on the ground doing the day job at the Gemba where things happen, that they implement within a month at very low cost. And it doesn't go through this big central committee of collecting suggestions that then get ignored as a great marketoonist. Tom Fishburne, the marketoonist, has a great campaign, has a great set of cartoons, and there's one about idea boxes, and the idea goes in the other side is a shredder, shredding the ideas and it goes into the suggestion box. So at Toyota, it's everybody's day job to identify opportunities to improve things, then to use the Kaizen process, use an A3 if it's of significant size, but to go through that structured process to make sure it actually works and to go through it quickly. So you said something important earlier on. It sometimes does take a little bit longer than coming up with an idea by yourself and writing it into this wonderful 50-page presentation to present at the next management board meeting. But it's much more quicker and much more likely to be successful than those wonderful presentations. Because by the time I get to a meeting with an A3, everybody knows what's involved. Everybody knows what I expect of them. Everybody's been involved. And I always, on the back of the A3, I always have a little box, a series of boxes for signatures for all the key players. And when they wrote the signature in the box, I had permission from them to proceed with the campaign. When they got that last signature, that was it. I was ready to go. They'd committed time, resources, money, people, energy to fulfilling what's on the A3. I was ready to go. And everything at Toyota typically gets run through these A3 type sheets, and many Japanese companies run in a similar way. I have used it elsewhere in Western companies. It's a bit of a struggle to use in some. I used it at a major European airline, for example, as part of we taught it to them how to do this process as part of using Toyota Carter, the Toyota's way of business agile. But it's not easy because it's counterintuitive. Some hero creates a wonderful presentation, 50 pages long, presented at a board meeting. They create a business case which is designed to get funding. Once the business case has been funded, then it's abandoned and forgotten about because I've got the funding. That's what its purpose was.
Mm-hmm.
Things are different. The business, you write your plan, and you calculate what funding you need to make it work. But remember that last part of the A3 is follow-up. So that follow-up is about measuring how successful you were and working out how to standardize the things that work well and improve through plan, do, check, act, Kaizen, the things that need improving.
What I love about the model is it's really embedding continuous transformation into the culture of an organization. It's just the operating model. This is what we do.
Yes.
We're asking you to help us continuously co-create the future. Yeah, very well done. We have got to, speaking of airlines, we need to land the plane. But
yes.
Before we do, I have one last question I have for you, which is what I ask all my guests because of the name of the show is called the Delighted Customers Podcast. What delights you as a customer?
Yes, okay. I think I'm not atypical as a customer. If I'm going to answer the question, I think I'm going to refer to yet another idea, the serve call model from the 1980s. It's been around for a long time, been proven many, many times over, and they identified looked at what drives service quality.
Mm-hmm.
And out of that, out of much research in many different companies, and I've used it in my work at airlines and other companies as well, they came up with a rater model. And the rater model says the things we look for in service quality are reliability, assurance, so having good staff, tangible, so buildings, communications, uniforms, etc., empathy, and I include compassion with empathy, and responsiveness. In most companies, in most situations, with most customers, the most important point by far is reliability. Doing what you say on the tin, time in, time out, to the same degree of quality, so that I know exactly what I'm expecting. Because don't forget, service quality, in the old calculation, the old equation, if you like, is the difference between perceptions and expectations. If I know what to expect and you deliver that, that's going to be high quality. But absolutely might not be particularly sparkling, might be Ryanair, compared to Emirates. But if I know what I'm expecting, you deliver it time and time again, that's quality, and only the customer defines quality. Deliver what you see on the tin, time in, time out, the same way, and I'll be a happy customer because I know exactly what to expect.
Excellent. Well, I'm always learning from you. I appreciate you. And thank you so much for joining us all the way from Germany. If people wanted to get a hold of you and learn more, or maybe even bring you on board to help them solve some problems, what would be the best way for them to connect with you?
Best way by far is to find me on LinkedIn, Graham Hill, and reach out to me there. I'm quite active on
Perfect.
LinkedIn and I, a lot of people helped me when I was early on in my career. And I'm happy to help others as a consequence, whether they want to work with me or just want advice. Happy to help, always happy to help.
Excellent. Dr. Graham Hill, thank you so much for being on the Delighted Customers podcast.
My pleasure, Mark. Thank you indeed.